Have you ever stood on the edge of a decision? I don't mean choosing what to have for dinner or which movie to watch. I mean a real precipice. The kind where one step could change everything. It could be the decision to leave a job that's stable but slowly draining the life from you. It could be the moment you're about to click publish on a creative project you've poured your soul into, exposing it to the judgment of the world. It could be the words, "I love you," sitting on the tip of your tongue, or the difficult truth you know you need to speak to someone you care about. In those moments, a voice inside you, a voice that feels ancient and primal and incredibly wise, starts to scream. It screams, "Stop, turn back. It's not safe here." It paints vivid, high-definition pictures of failure, of embarrassment, of loss. It calculates all the odds and presents you an airtight case for why staying exactly where you are is the only logical choice. And so often we listen. We take that step back from the edge, breathe a sigh of relief, and tell ourselves it was a smart thing to do. But later, in the quiet moments, another question bubbles up. What if I had just taken the step? What was on the other side? This paralysis, this gap between our ambition and our action, is one of the most universal and painful parts of the human experience. We see the lives we want to live, the people we want to become, but there's an invisible wall of fear separating us from them. Why is this struggle so common? Why do even the most intelligent, capable, and talented among us find ourselves frozen in place, held captive by a feeling? This very question became an obsession for a man named Ryan Cole. He wasn't a philosopher or a psychologist, at least not at first. He was a man who operated in the world of high stakes, a world of corporate strategy where a single decision could make or break a company. And what he saw over and over again wasn't that the best ideas won. It was that the bravest people won. He saw brilliant projects wither on the vine because their champions were too afraid to fight for them. He saw entire companies crumble, not from a lack of innovation, but from a surplus of caution. Cole became consumed with understanding the architecture of that internal scream, the anatomy of that invisible wall. He wanted to know if it could be dismantled, or if we were all just fated to live within the comfortable prisons it builds for us. This is a story of his journey, a journey that led him to a profound and counterintuitive truth about fear, and a practical way for all of us to finally step forward even when every part of us is screaming to stop. Ryan Cole's quest didn't begin in a laboratory or a library. It began in the sterile, fluorescent-lit environment of a failing technology firm. In the early 2000s, he was a rising star in corporate strategy, the kind of person brought in to find the hidden asset, the overlooked opportunity that could turn a sinking ship around. The company he was working for was on the brink of obsolescence. Their flagship product was being systematically dismantled by a hungrier, more agile competitor, and the mood inside the building was a thick soup of anxiety and quiet desperation. In his search for a lifeline, Cole discovered a small, skunkworks project buried deep within the engineering department. It was led by a woman named Anna, a software engineer who was, by all accounts, a quiet genius. What she had built was more than just an update. It was a complete paradigm shift. It was elegant, powerful, and 2 years ahead of anything the competition was even thinking about. It was, without exaggeration, the silver bullet the company needed to survive. But there was a problem. The idea was so radical that it would require completely re-engineering the company's core product and abandoning their existing business model. It was a terrifyingly big bet. Cole knew he needed Anna to be the champion of this vision. He needed her to stand in front of the board of directors, a room full of skeptical, risk-averse executives, and make them believe. He prepped her for weeks, helping her build a presentation, fine-tuning the data, and running through every possible question and objection. He saw the fire in her eyes when she talked about the technology. But as the day of the big presentation approached, he saw something else too, a creeping, suffocating dread. On the morning of the meeting, she was visibly trembling. Her voice, usually so precise, was shaky and thin. When the time came for her to present, she stood up, walked to the front of the boardroom, and faltered. The brilliant, world-changing vision she had articulated so passionately in private came out as a series of mumbled technical specifications. When executives pushed back with tough questions, she conceded points she shouldn't have. She downplayed the potential. She emphasized the risks. She wasn't selling a revolution. She was apologizing for an inconvenience. The board, smelling her lack of conviction, killed the project on the spot. 6 months later, the company was acquired for pennies on the dollar, and its assets were stripped. The brilliant innovation was lost forever. Cole would later say that watching Anna in that boardroom was the most profound professional failure of his life. He had equipped her with all the data, all the logic, all the strategy she needed. He had given her everything except the one tool that mattered most, the ability to overcome her own fear. That failure became a splinter in his mind. He couldn't stop replaying that moment, seeing the terror in her eyes eclipse her genius. He realized that the greatest obstacle to human progress wasn't a lack of good ideas, but a fear that prevents those ideas from ever seeing the light of day. He left the world of corporate strategy behind, haunted by the ghost of that dead company and the memory of Anna's silence. He embarked on a new mission, to understand why a person so brilliant could be so utterly disarmed by fear, and to find out what, if anything, could be done about it. His journey began with a simple yet flawed assumption. He believed that the people who achieved great things, the elite soldiers, the world-class athletes, the pioneering entrepreneurs, must have found a way to eliminate fear. They must have been born with a different wiring, a genetic cheat code that made them immune to the anxieties that plagued the rest of us. So he set out to find these fearless people and decode their secrets. He spent months interviewing Navy SEALs, smoke jumpers who parachuted into forest fires, and trauma surgeons who made life-or-death decisions every single day. He talked to startup founders who had gambled their life savings on an idea, and to climbers who scaled sheer rock faces without ropes. What he found didn't just challenge his assumption, it shattered it completely. Person after person told him not that they felt no fear, but that they felt it constantly, often in overwhelming, heart-pounding waves. A Navy SEAL commander told him, "The day you're not scared on a mission is the day you get yourself and your team killed. Fear is what keeps you sharp." A big wave surfer described the moments before paddling into a monstrous 50-foot wave not as a feeling of zen-like calm, but as an all-consuming electric terror that made his entire body hum. But he explained that this terror was also a signal. It was his body flooding his system with adrenaline, heightening his senses, shortening his reaction time, and forcing him into a state of absolute, unbreakable focus. This was the first major breakthrough for Cole. He realized he had been asking the entirely wrong question. The goal wasn't to get rid of fear. In fact, fear was an essential survival tool, a high-performance enhancing drug designed by millions of years of evolution. The problem was that our modern lives are filled with triggers that activate this ancient system for situations that aren't actually life-threatening. The saber-toothed tiger our brain perceives isn't a predator in the bushes. It's a potential for social rejection, for professional failure, for looking foolish. Our bodies are preparing for a physical fight for survival, when the battle is actually one of ego and vulnerability. This led him to his first core principle. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the reframing of it. The people he studied hadn't vanquished fear. They had repurposed it. They had learned to interpret the physical sensations of fear, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, the shallow breath, not as a command to retreat, but as a signal that they were about to do something that mattered. It was a biological green light, a message from the body saying, "Pay attention. This is important." All systems are now online and at peak capacity. Cole tells a story about a concert pianist he interviewed who suffered from debilitating stage fright. For years, she saw it as a weakness, a sign she wasn't cut out for performing. She tried everything to calm her nerves, beta blockers, meditation, therapy, but nothing worked. The terror before a show was relentless. Then she worked with a performance coach who taught her to change the story she told herself. Instead of saying, "My hands are shaking, I'm going to mess up," she learned to say, "My body is getting ready. This energy is what I need to give an incredible performance." She didn't stop feeling the anxiety, but she transformed it from a debilitating curse into a source of power. She started to welcome the feeling, to see it as her partner on stage. This was a revelation. It meant that the power to act wasn't found in becoming some kind of stoic, unfeeling robot. It was found in a simple, conscious cognitive shift. It was about learning to listen to the roar of fear and hear not a warning, but a welcome. This first breakthrough was powerful. The idea of reframing fear, of turning the poison into a potion, gave Cole a new lens through which to view the problem. He began sharing this concept in workshops and with coaching clients, and the initial results were promising. People were inspired by the idea that their anxiety could be a superpower in disguise. But soon, a more complex and frustrating problem emerged. For a certain group of people, the principle seemed to fall flat. They understood the concept intellectually. They could agree that, yes, reframing fear's focus was a wonderful idea. But when they stood on the edge of their own personal precipice, when the primal scream started in their own minds, the theory dissolved. A client of his, a man named Mark who dreamed of quitting his soul-crushing accounting job to become a carpenter, summed up the problem perfectly. "I get it, Ryan," he said. "I can tell myself that my pounding heart means I'm excited to start my own business. I can sit here and reframe it all day. But when I actually think about calling a potential client or renting a workshop space, my mind just goes blank. It's like a wall goes up and the logic can't get through. I'm still stuck." This was the complication Cole had been missing. Reframing the feeling was a crucial first step, but it wasn't the whole story. It was like knowing the principles of aerodynamics, but still being too afraid to get in the plane. There was a deeper mechanism at play, a lock that the key of cognitive reframing alone couldn't turn. This sent Cole back to his research, but this time he focused not on the feeling of fear, but on the behavior of inaction. Why did Mark freeze? What was happening in his brain in that moment between intention and action? He dove into neuroscience and psychology of decision-making and discovered a fundamental conflict in the way our brains are wired. Our primitive, emotional brain, the part that screams at us to run from the saber-toothed tiger, demands absolute certainty and safety. It wants a guaranteed outcome before it will permit action. But our rational, modern world is a landscape of almost infinite uncertainty. There are no guarantees when starting a business, asking someone out, or pursuing a creative passion. This creates a state of perpetual gridlock. The emotional brain holds action hostage, demanding a ransom of certainty that the rational brain can never pay. The people who were still stuck, like Mark, were waiting for the feeling of fear to go away. They were waiting for a moment of absolute confidence and clarity before they took the first step. They were waiting for a guarantee. And that moment, Cole realized, would never come. This is where he stumbled upon his second and perhaps more profound principle. Certainty is not the prerequisite for action. It is the product of it. The elite performers he had studied didn't start with a feeling of certainty. They generated it. They manufactured it. And they did so by taking small, deliberate, and often reversible steps into the unknown. This was the action certainty loop. He saw that the brain's craving for certainty could be satisfied, but not through thinking, planning, or rationalizing. It could only be satisfied with data. And the only way to get data about an uncertain future is to run an experiment, to take an action, a tiny action. Cole went back to Mark, the aspiring carpenter. He told him to forget about writing a business plan, forget about quitting his job, forget about finding the perfect workshop. He gave him one single task: go to a hardware store, buy one beautiful piece of wood, a single plank of maple or cherry, and spend the weekend making one small, simple object like a jewelry box. No pressure for it to be perfect, no requirement to sell it. The only goal was to interact with the reality of the dream. Mark did it, and in doing so, he generated a tiny, microscopic speck of certainty. He confirmed that he still loved the smell of sawdust. He learned that his hands remembered the skills from his high school woodshop class. The massive, terrifying cloud of starting a carpentry business was replaced by the tangible, manageable reality of, I made a box. This small dose of certainty didn't eliminate his fear, but it quieted it just enough for him to take the next small step, showing the box to a friend. The friend loved it and asked if he could make another one for her. Another speck of certainty. The loop had begun. Action created a small bit of data, which reduced uncertainty, which made the next action slightly less terrifying. Fear wasn't being conquered in a single heroic battle. It was being slowly and systematically starved of its primary fuel, the unknown. For months, Ryan Cole operated with these two powerful but separate ideas. On one hand, you had the principle of reframing fear, of changing your internal narrative about what the physical sensations of anxiety actually mean. On the other hand, You had the action certainty loop, the mechanical process of taking small steps to generate data and reduce the unknown. Both were effective, but they felt like two different tools from two different toolkits. He felt he was still missing the unifying theory, the elegant equation that would explain how they work together. The aha moment came, as they so often do, not in a moment of intense focus, but in a moment of quiet reflection. He was watching his young daughter learn to swim. She was terrified of the water. For weeks, her instructor had been trying to coax her into the deep end, using every trick in the book. He tried encouraging her, reasoning with her, telling her how much fun it would be. Nothing worked. She would just cling to the side of the pool, her knuckles white with fear. Cole watched as this new instructor came in. He didn't try to convince her that the water wasn't scary. Instead, he sat down at the edge of the pool with her and said, "I know it feels scary. When your heart beats fast like that, it means you're getting ready for a big challenge. It means you're being brave." In that moment, he was giving her the first principle. He was helping her reframe the feeling. Then, he didn't ask her to jump in. He didn't even ask her to let go of the side. He held up a small plastic ring and said, "All I want you to do is see if you can touch this ring with one finger." It was a laughably small request. She hesitated, then slowly reached out and tapped the ring. "Great," he said. "Now, can you grab it?" She did. "Amazing. Now, can you put it back on the side of the pool?" She did. For 10 minutes, he gave her a series of tiny, almost insignificant tasks, each one a minuscule step further away from the safety of the wall. Watching this unfold, everything clicked into place for Cole. He saw the entire system in action. The grand synthesis, the unifying idea, was this: courage is not a feeling to be waited for, nor is it a character trait to be possessed. Courage is a skill that is built through a deliberate, two-step process. He called it the process of courage cultivation. Step 1 is the internal reframe. Acknowledge the physical sensation of fear and tell yourself a different story about it. My heart is pounding, not because I'm in danger, but because my body is giving me the energy and focus I need to do this. This transforms the enemy into an ally. Step 2 is external action. Initiate the action certainty loop with the smallest, safest, most manageable step imaginable. What is the one-finger touch equivalent of your goal? If you're afraid of public speaking, it's not to give a TED Talk. It's to record a 1-minute video on your phone that nobody will ever see. If you're afraid of starting a business, it's not to quit your job. It's to spend 15 minutes researching a single competitor. This grand idea fundamentally changed everything. It meant that fear was no longer an obstacle to be overcome before the journey could begin. Instead, fear was a starting pistol. The feeling of fear was the very signal to initiate the two-step process. It demystified bravery, taking it out of the realm of heroes and legends and placing it firmly in the hands of ordinary people. Courage wasn't about a heroic leap of faith across a giant chasm. It was about building a bridge, one tiny, data-driven plank at a time, all while using the feeling of fear as the fuel to keep building. So we've journeyed with Ryan Cole from the ghost of a failed company to the edge of a swimming pool. We watched him dismantle the myth of fearlessness, discovering that the brave don't feel less fear, they just relate to it differently. We saw him uncover the paralyzing trap of waiting for certainty, and how the only way out is to act your way in. And finally, we arrived at his beautifully simple and profound synthesis, that courage is not a thing you have, but a thing you do. It's a process, a skill, a two-part system for moving forward when the alarms in your head are blaring. The blueprint he left us with is not about grand gestures. It's about quiet, consistent, and deliberate practice. First, you change the story. You learn to greet the familiar, uncomfortable sensations of fear not as a stop sign, but as a welcome. This is my body getting ready. This is focus. This is energy. Second, you shrink the change. You find the smallest possible action that moves you forward, the action so small that it seems almost trivial, but that generates one new piece of information. You ask yourself, what is the action I can take in the next 10 minutes that will make the future 1% less uncertain? It is in the relentless repetition of this two-step dance, reframe the feeling, take the tiny step, that the invisible wall of fear begins to dissolve. It's how Anna could have walked into that boardroom and champion her idea. It's how Mark, the accountant, eventually built a thriving carpentry business, one small box at a time. And it's how you can finally step off the edge of your own precipice and toward the life you know you're meant to live. Understanding this is powerful, but the real change happens when we move from understanding to action. The cost of inaction is too high. It's the book that never gets written, the business that never gets started, the relationship that never begins, the truth that never gets spoken. It's a life lived in the shadow of what if. If this story resonated with you, if you feel that pull to step forward, then I invite you to make a commitment to yourself right now. Subscribing to this channel is more than just clicking a button. It's your first small, reversible step. It's a declaration that you're ready to be part of a community dedicated to building that bridge, plank by plank. It is your first engagement with the Action Certainty Loop, because the world doesn't need more people who are waiting to be fearless. It needs more people who are willing to do it scared.